Hey co-stars, welcome to another Generation Films video. My name is British Ben, and today we are continuing our 10 Flaws of Fictional Space Navies series with Star Trek's Starfleet, who operate under the United Federation of Planets. They were a fundamentally flawed organization of tea-drinking nerds.
Tea, Earl Grey, hot.
Tea, Earl Grey, hot. Would you like some tea?
No.
Who enjoyed Dickensian novels.
Humbug, I tell you. Humbug.
Freeze program. Very well done, Data.
And didn't listen to any music produced after the 1950s. Anyway, that doesn't tell us anything about their effectiveness as a space navy, so let's look at my actual list of flaws. Number 1. No cloaking devices. Cloaking devices were common on both Klingon and Romulan vessels, the Federation's two traditional enemies. The Federation had obtained a Romulan cloaking device in the year 2268 by sending the Enterprise to steal one from the Romulans. They installed the device on the Enterprise, which enabled it to cloak. They obtained another one in 2286 from the HMS Bounty, a Klingon vessel stolen by Kirk and his crew. They could have easily reverse engineered these cloaking devices and produced them on a mass scale. But in the year 2311, the Federation signed the Treaty of Algeron with the Romulan Star Empire. It defined the neutral zone between the two powers that each side was forbidden to cross, thus stopped confrontation between them. But it forbid the Federation from developing cloaking technology for their starships, whilst the Romulans still could. So the Federation lost out in a big way in order to maintain the status quo. Sounds like some other one-sided deals I can think of.
It is clear that the House does not support this deal, but tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how.
Let's not go there. Now, because of that treaty, the Federation didn't develop cloaking technology on starships. Doesn't mean they didn't try. Some factions within Starfleet intelligence did develop a cloaking device that enabled ships not to just be invisible, but to travel through matter such as asteroids and planets as well. It would have made Starfleet ships almost invincible, but as soon as the device was discovered by the crew of the Enterprise D, who used it to escape being trapped in an asteroid, they owned up to the Romulans and vowed not to break the treaty again. They could literally have just flown past the Romulan warbird and continued to develop the technology in secret, but they chose to own up about it instead. There was, however, one Starfleet ship that legitimately had a cloaking device, and that was the USS Defiant. That cloaking device was on loan from the Romulans and officially could only be used in the Gamma Quadrant. With cloaking technology, think how much more effective Starfleet could have been against the Borg. Voyager could have traveled back through the Delta Quadrant cloaked, avoiding most of the confrontations, and the Enterprise E would have fared a lot better against the Scimitar. But Starfleet and the Federation was too much of a goody-two-shoes organization and didn't want to break the rules. Number 2. Not many dedicated warships. For all of the Next Generation era, and certainly the first half of the Deep Space Nine era, Starfleet lacked any dedicated warships. Ships such as the Enterprise D were more like luxury cruise liners in space. Look, they even had a yoga studio.
It's ridiculous and wonderful.
And a bar that hosted a weekly wrestling event. But all that tomfoolery made them unprepared for a serious encounter with a hostile alien force. At the Battle of Wolf 359, they lost 39 ships against a single Borg cube. And at the Battle of Sector 001, they didn't fare that much better, losing at least 20. Starfleet did eventually realize their stupidity and start building some dedicated warships such as the Defiant class and later the Prometheus class, which was able to defeat a Romulan D'Deridex-class warbird with little effort by utilizing its multi-vector attack mode, where the ship split into 3 pieces. But if these ships had been introduced earlier, think how many lives could have been saved in the wars with the Borg and the Dominion. Number 3. Section 31, an out-of-control intelligence agency. Starfleet had a super-secret, autonomous special operations agency known as Section 31. They were somewhat akin to the CIA, if you believe all the conspiracy theories about that organization. They wore black comm badges, and officially they weren't part of Starfleet.
You don't sound like Starfleet.
Because I'm not Starfleet. We are far more resourceful. That's how we found you. And don't worry, we know how to keep a secret.
Even though they were created by Starfleet originally, but they could break all of Starfleet's rules.
Phlox was kidnapped. Starfleet would never authorize that.
Reread the Charter, Article 14, Section 31. There are a few lines that make allowances for bending the rules during times of extraordinary threat.
In the early days of the NX-01 Enterprise, Malcolm Reed was contracted by Section 31 and for a period of time worked against Captain Archer's orders. In the Kelvin timeline, Section 31 worked with genetically engineered humans to secretly design and build a Dreadnought-class starship and then tried to cover their tracks by killing the Enterprise crew who discovered the plot. That ended up with Section 31's ship, the USS Vengeance, crashing into Starfleet's own headquarters in San Francisco. In the Dominion War, Section 31 developed a biological weapon in the form of a virus which infected the Founders. Luckily, Odo passed on the cure to his people, saving them from extinction. Section 31 weren't accountable to anyone. They had no known physical headquarters, and for them, the end would justify the means. Put simply, they could kill whoever they wanted to if they thought that it was for the benefit of the Federation. But this all created internal conflicts with other officers and just led to instability and death. Number 4. The Prime Directive. The Prime Directive, also known as General Order 1, was Starfleet's non-interference rule. Whilst being quite complicated with 47 sub-orders in general, it prohibited Starfleet from interfering in the internal affairs of alien cultures and also prohibited them from revealing themselves to pre-warp civilizations. But this rule, whilst being logical for the most part, sometimes stopped the Federation from mounting rescue missions to save their own people. Like the time Worf is aboard a Klingon ship that is attacked by a rival faction in the Klingon Civil War. Or the recent, warning, I'm going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. The recent episode of Star Trek Discovery in which Captain Pike decides not to take a breakaway human civilization of 11,000 people in the Beta Quadrant back to Earth because they are still at the level of pre-warp civilization. Even though one guy in the group is really clued in about what's going on, has already guessed that they have a starship and seems totally up for being rescued. The rule also sometimes caused Starfleet crews to place themselves in danger in order to avoid revealing themselves to less developed civilizations.
Did the indigenous life forms see you?
No, Mr. Spock, they did not.
The Prime Directive clearly states there can be no interference with the internal development of alien civilization.
I know what it says, which is why I'm running through the jungle wearing a disguise.
Although it didn't really go as planned in that particular instance. Basically, the Prime Directive is a nuisance, and it's always something they end up messing up anyway.
Who are they?
Number 5. The Earth is often left defenseless. Which modern military doesn't put its most advanced weapons and ships in position to defend its home territory? The US has military bases all over the country, so does the UK. When Russian bombers fly close to UK airspace, Eurofighter Typhoon aircraft can be mobilized within minutes to intercept. But in Starfleet, they often leave the Earth defenseless. There seems to be no home fleet to protect the planet, and this massive thing in orbit was unarmed. Can you believe that? Although it did have 40 weapon mounts on which phasers could be installed and could be ready for battle within, wait for it, a week. The Borg aren't going to wait for a week for you to be ready for battle. On 2 occasions, Borg cubes were able to breach the so-called Mars defense perimeter, which really didn't offer much defense at all. Look, there it is, gone. And they managed to fly right up to Earth orbit. On the first occasion, the Enterprise D was the only ship that could get to Earth to stop them. On the second occasion, Starfleet were a bit better prepared with a fleet of maybe 30 ships as a last line of defense for Earth. Number 6. lack of industrial capacity. While other space navies were able to build battle stations the size of small moons 160 kilometers across, the biggest thing Starfleet was able to build was this Starfleet 74, which was apparently 13 kilometers in height. The Galactic Empire in Star Wars had 25,000 Star Destroyers. That's 25,000 of just one class of ship. But Starfleet was nowhere near that formidable. Some nerds online do estimate that there were probably about 25,000 vessels in Starfleet's fleet, but that includes runabouts, which are about the size of a Winnebago, as well as small fighters. So the actual number of capital ships would have been probably closer to 10,000. And many of them were older Miranda, Excelsior, and Nebula class vessels. Starfleet's smaller size compared to the Galactic Empire in Star Wars or other space navies in Star Trek were due to their ethics, the fact that they didn't use slave labor. The Death Star was built with the labor of Wookiee slaves. The Romulans used slave labor of the Remans, their neighboring planet, to build their massive fleet, and the Borg, of course, kidnapped the populations of entire planets and turned them into drones to carry out construction of huge cubes and all of the operations of their fleet. So Starfleet had the moral high ground, but they also got totally destroyed in battles several times. Number 7. They mixed their civilian population with the military. For a long time, Starfleet didn't build warships, which meant that those luxury cruise liner type ships with yoga studios had to double as warships when the time came, but these ships carried the crew's family members, including wives, children, and even pets.
Will you take care of Spot for me?
Your animal.
During the Battle of Wolf 359, Commander Sisko's wife and son were both aboard his ship, the USS Saratoga, when it engaged a Borg cube. The ship was an older Miranda-class vessel and was easily disabled and then completely destroyed by the Borg. The Borg assault blew up Sisko's quarters where his son Jake and his wife Jennifer were. Sisko managed to save his son, but his wife had already died from the blast. He was forced to take his son to an escape pod and eject, leaving his wife's body on board to be destroyed when the ship blew up. The event, of course, brought serious emotional damage to Sisko, but could have easily been avoided if Starfleet had just been a bit more realistic about the dangers of living on a starship that could be called to fight off alien cyborgs at a moment's notice. Basically, family members of the officers should have stayed at home. Number 8. Questionable human resources practices. In Star Trek, it often seems like everyone above the rank of captain is a total douchebag. Just like Admiral Doherty in Star Trek Insurrection, who orders the relocation of an entire civilization.
And it will destroy the Baku. Just as cultures have been destroyed in every other forced relocation throughout history.
Jean-Luc, we're only moving 600 people.
How many people does it take, Admiral, before it becomes wrong?
Or Admiral Marcus in the Kelvin timeline, who conspires with Section 31 and almost kills the entire Enterprise crew.
Leaving me no choice but to hunt you down and destroy you. Lock phasers.
Wait, sir, wait!
I'll make this quick. Target all aft torpedoes on the Enterprise bridge.
There were also some questionable promotions of junior officers. Nog of Ferengi reached the rank of ensign after just 2 years as a cadet at Starfleet Academy. He was the only Ferengi in Starfleet, so perhaps this is what they call affirmative action. Then there was Wesley Crusher, who was made an acting ensign before he'd even taken the Starfleet Academy entrance exam. Picard later promoted him to being a full ensign before he had attended the Academy as a cadet. He was brilliant, but he also almost destroyed the ship on several occasions. But his mom was best friends with the captain, so wahey! Number 9. Life expectancy of junior officers is very short. Well, this may be cliche, but junior officers always die. In the original series, they wore red shirts. And in later series, they wore yellow shirts. But basically the rule is, whenever they introduce a new crew member in addition to the main cast, it's basically because they're gonna die. Like Lieutenant Hawk in Star Trek First Contact.
We have an invisible range. Abort.
Guess what? He dies.
Hawk!
talk!
I'm guessing this crew members just lacked the appropriate training, or perhaps were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but actually I think it's more like a storytelling element. They can't kill off the main characters, but they want to know the situation is dangerous by having a few people die. Number 10. They were kind of racist, or speciesist. For an organization that was in theory open for any member species of the Federation to join, and even non-member species could join actually if they got a letter of recommendation from a Starfleet officer, there sure were a lot of humans serving on these ships and not many aliens. The Enterprise D only had Worf on the bridge, who was fully non-human, Troy was half Betazoid, and Data was an android made to look exactly like a human, almost. The only non-human bridge officer on Voyager was Tuvok, same with the NX-01 Enterprise. It seems the Vulcans folded their fleet into Starfleet after the Federation was formed, since we never see any Vulcan ships in the Prime Timeline series except for Enterprise, which was mostly before the forming of the Federation. So you'd expect to see more Vulcan officers, but actually you never do, except for this Vulcan captain on Benjamin Sisko's ship. So maybe they're just racist, or maybe there are actually other Federation ships with completely Vulcan crews. Vulcans do say that they hate the smell of humans, so it's like they practice segregation perhaps. Anyway, humanity first, so I think I'm with the Federation on this. Screw aliens, screw dolphins. Okay guys, so that's our 10 flaws of Star Trek's Starfleet. Do vote in the poll and tell us which you think is the biggest flaw. And we will be back in a few days with 10 advantages of Starfleet. So if you're new, please subscribe so that you don't miss that video. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.